So I want to talk about pulse width modulation with the Subharmonicon. In my video review for Ask.Audio, I demonstrated pulse width modulation using some external signals. Let me now show you how to create pulse width modulation internally. Now both the oscillators have a pulse waveform, and both can be pulse width modulated. The switch here lets you select between different waveforms. In the middle position, the sub-oscillator is modulating the pulse width of the main oscillator. I've brought down the level of everything except VCO1. So if I trigger it right now, we should be able to hear this. So if the switch is in the pulse position, we actually get a square shape. But if I switch it to this middle position, now the sub-oscillator is modulating the pulse width. And of course, it's at audio rate. Now I can change the tuning of the sub-oscillator, and you notice how the tonality changes because it's affecting the pulse width. We can tune down the main oscillator, but it's still hard to hear that slow-moving pulse width modulation that we're all familiar with. Now keep in mind the sub-oscillator is a sawtooth shape, so that's what's being used to modulate the pulse width. Now another option is to use the patch bay. There is a pulse width modulation input for both the VCOs. Having a semi-modular device like this makes it a lot more flexible. So I can take the envelope generator output on the patch bay and use that to modulate the pulse width for VCO1. So let's give that a shot. So now when I trigger the envelopes with this button over here, this VCF envelope, which is a basic attack decay envelope, is going to modulate the pulse width. Not bad. Let's hear this with the sequence. I think my attack is too long here, so I'm going to bring that down. It works in both positions, in the square position as well as that middle position. Alright, so that's a second way to modulate the pulse width. Now a third way is to use the voltage values from the step sequencer to modulate the pulse width. So I'm going to just swap this out with sequencer 2's voltage values. So that's going to modulate the pulse width for VCO1. I'm going to just run the second sequence, not the first one. I'm also going to disable the pitch modulation from the sequencer. VCO2 is out of the picture anyway. So now based on those stepped voltages, we're now hearing pulse width modulation. In fact, if I just hold down this trigger button, we can listen and adjust the pulse width. Now the range is kind of narrow because the range here is set to plus minus 1 octave. Let's switch it to 2. Slightly wider range. We also have a plus minus 5 octave range. That sounds a lot wider. So now I'm going to step through the sequencer and adjust the different positions. And now when we play this, we hear a stepped modulation of pulse width. Alright, so sequence 2 is modulating the pulse width on oscillator 1. You can see here sequence 2 is active with rhythm 1. Let's activate rhythm 2 for sequencer 1. The range is a bit too wide for this, so I'm going to tone down the values here. So now sequencer 1 is modulating the pitch for VCO1, and sequencer 2 is modulating the pulse width. Alright, so those are a few ways to set up pulse width modulation on the Subharmonicon. If there are any questions on the Subharmonicon, or if there are any features you want me to demonstrate, please let me know in the comments below. And I'll see you in the next one.